DJI Raw FPV, thank you for a $10 super chat. Will y'all ever expand the FPV business for people to get easy access what they need? We need a store location in New York. There's more indoor RC car locations than Tiny Whoops. Thank you for a $10 super chat, Will. DJI Raw. Who's y'all? Who are you yelling at? I think you're just sort of shouting into the void, and I get that. But the flip side is, like, what needs to happen is that a person needs to rent a building and start a store, right? And that, so when you say, well, y'all do, so someone has to do that, and that means that someone has to put up the money to do it, and that's why no one has done it. Do you know why there's more RC car locations than Tiny Whoop locations? Because the number of FPV pilots is so small, and the cost of running a retail store is so high that no one can afford to do it. Almost no one. There are rare exceptions. You have no idea how difficult it is to run a retail store around FPV. FPV as a hobby is constantly shifting what product it thinks is the best. And so a store that buys a bunch of stock is going to get stuck with the stock and not be able to sell it. So hang on. First of all, there's an extremely small number of FPV pilots. So the number of customers that any given store could have is extremely small. That's not true for RC cars. There's a shitload of people who drive RC cars because RC cars are easy to drive. FPV is hard. So you have a small user base. The user base is extremely picky. This month, such and such a product is hot. Next month, oh, it turns out that it's effed up or there's something better and nobody wants it. So it's extremely hard to keep inventory. You know how online stuff is always out of stock? The whole point of a brick and mortar store is that you walk into the store and you come out with the thing you want. How do you think that store would do when you can't get product from a vendor for 3 months at a time because the vendor just isn't shipping it? Online, you just go, it's out of stock, and you try and find it somewhere else. At a brick and mortar store, you would just never come back because everything would always be out of stock. Margins are terrible. Right now, stores operating out of the United States are being squeezed because stores like AliExpress are selling stuff at a lower margin, and people are just like, fine, yeah, we'll buy from AliExpress. I can save 40 bucks off the price of my order. Done. And stores in the United States that don't even have a storefront, just a warehouse, and employees that they have to pay U.S. minimum wage are struggling to fight that. Never mind a small mom and pop shop in New York City, of all places. The reason it's not happening is because no one could do it and make money. So when you say y'all need to do it, when you say, will y'all ever expand? The answer is no, not until it becomes profitable. And these are all of the steps towards it becoming profitable. If such a store does exist, the only way it will succeed is by having a strong online presence and doing most of their business online, and then having a warehouse with a storefront that is incidentally a storefront. It's my opinion. Will you be testing the new analog module from SpeedyBee and comparing it with others? Only night, I'm not going to promise that I will do it, but I am definitely interested in doing it because I think that having another analog goggle module out there that is on par with Rapid Fire and TBS Fusion would be very beneficial. Right now, Rapid Fire and TBS Fusion, and then in a very slight third place is SkyZone SteadyView, but they're sort of up here at the top, and then kind of everybody else is like down here. Because those analog modules do, number one, they have a more sensitive receiver chip that is literally just able to pick up weaker signals. And number two, they have two technologies. One is sync pulse reconstruction and one is frame combining. And these two technologies help keep the video, sync pulse reconstruction helps keep the video from rolling when the sync pulses get destroyed. And frame combining helps keep the video from flashing when the antenna, instead of diversity switching, which results in flashing images, frame combining means the image stays steady and doesn't flash. And together, they really improve the ability to fly through interference and breakup. And those three things, frame combining, sync pulse reconstruction, and whatever the name of this chip is. It's not the RX 5808 chip that is commonly used. It's some other chip whose name I don't know off the top of my head. Those three things put these guys on a tier of their own. So I believe that SkyZone SteadyView has those things and deserves to be tested, especially because it's coming in at a competitive price. Yeah, One Eye FPV, you are correct. One Eye FPV points out that with the SteadyView, you should only buy the recent, newer receivers, like the V3, I think is what it is, or V3.3. They changed the hardware to resolve some incompatibility issues with certain cameras that resulted in rolling images. Roger Maz wants to know, is there a way to change my Tyrannus QX7 from EU LBT to FCC? Yes, there is. If you look in this is the QX7 Access. I don't know if they changed it for ISRM firmware, but let's look. So here's the firmware download, and we're not talking about the radio OS, right? That's not what we're talking about. That's OpenTX. We're talking about the internal radio module. If I download that firmware for the module, we'll just sit here for 14 seconds while we wait for it to download. Then X9D 2019, no. So it looks like for ISRM, there is only one file, and you change from LBT to FCC in the firmware, in the menu options. So then if I go to the original QX7, I think it's going to be different. Sit tight. The original QX7 had the ACCST module. Hello. Tyrannus. QX7S. Woof. The world is moving on.
Load more. I think if you do load more, you'll get it.
I got it. Here's the firmware for the XJT RF module. And if we download this, okay. Here you can see there's two firmwares, one for LBT and one for FCC. So the answer is, if you have the older QX7, then you download this firmware and flash it, and that changes it. If you have the newer QX7 with the access radio, it is in the radio menus, and you change it there.